G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. Thanks very much for your time, attention and tuning in. We want to make sure that we give you as much information as we can each and every episode, which is why we get an awesome guest to come in here and share their knowledge and expertise. And today's guest is an absolute, I'm going to say influencer, though you might blush at that introduction here. Belinda The Valuer. You may know her from Belinda The Valuer online. Working at Optian valuation services as well. And we're going to have a real chat about all things valuation. Belinda, welcome on.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
It's awesome. Awesome to see you in person because
yes.
a lot of people might say, I've seen you on socials, and now to see you in the flesh, it's a real kick. So
yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
thanks.
Real credit to you. I think we kind of said before we jumped on, the move into socials, I feel like that's, you've just jumped in there and I won't say the word just, you've jumped on and you've really made it work for yourself to the point that you've got an incredible brand and persona. How enjoyable has that been for you?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's I think it was done by accident, by default almost. I started, I think the journey started on Instagram when I was building my house.
Right.
And I was just like every other person out there trying to get inspo. You know, what fashion designs are out there? Trends are happening in the kitchens, in bathroom tiles. What are people doing in lighting?
Yeah.
And I was just like everybody else getting sort of my inspo, sharing my journey, finish the home, and I'm like, okay, what now? I'm not an interior designer, so I couldn't share interior design, and I've gone, okay, maybe I might just share my perspective as a valuer. So I just started doing little posts on, because I built a project home. But I made it feel really custom, just, my years of experience seeing homes like, oh, I like that. I see what they did there. And when I was building, I would go through homes. I'm like, so where did you get the tiles from? And I'd take photos that weren't necessarily for the valuation and I'd send them to my husband and it'd be like, hey, babe, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? He's like, do your job. I'm like, I am. So there was a lot of like, since I'm there, I might as well just get some inspo. And people started saying, hey, I saw your post and you mentioned you did this and you felt it added value to your home. If I did this to my home, would I add value? And I've gone, yeah, sure. And I would spend like half an hour replying back and forth. And then I felt there was a bit of a gap or a hunger for that level of information. And that trickled into TikTok. Mm-hmm. And TikTok was at the very infancy stage of professionals sort of coming on there and talking about what they know. And I would remember being super embarrassed about being on there. Honestly, I'd be like, because value, you're a broker, right?
Yes.
So how professional and how like tight button of valuers. They're very behind the camera, or behind
the scenes. They're back a stage. Yeah.
And here I am putting my face out there, and I just had the valuer. I didn't even have my name, who I worked for, the company, and every now and then I'd get, "Are you from?" I'm like, "Oh my god." Oh my God, where did you see me? Do not say anything. And I was a little bit, and now it's funny because it's come almost 180 or 360, I guess, because I get other people saying, I want to start an account or I want to get on TikTok. How do you do it? What do you do? How did you get started? How did you grow your following? But I never intended on growing. I never did it for that. I did it to genuinely help and educate. Yeah. And I think because my intention never came from I want to get business out of it, I want to get clients out of it, I want to grow my company.
Yeah.
I was just working as a valuer. I didn't care. I wasn't making any money. So my intention, I think, came through really genuine and people resonated. And I just shared everything. I didn't care.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's so true about, look at the analogy on life. It's true for anything in life. People want money, they keep chasing. They're going to make a shortcut or bad decision, for example, versus the ones that fall in love with the process, which is what you've done, fell in love with the process, understood the platform, just came out of a small need for yourself. And then the results have just ticked on from there. And I think it's a real credit to what you're doing and the impact that you can have, because there's only some people you can talk to one-on-one or one-to-many, but now you go, hey, look, this message can then go and reach far and wide, and people that may have not had that access to you now suddenly do, which I think is incredible.
Yeah, it was that because there's a lot of misconception about what valuers actually do.
Yeah, which is exactly what we're going to talk about today. So,
and I think you know, any valuer listening to this would know that they can't even get our name right. They call us evaluators.
Oh, I had that written down. I'm like, if I had $1 for everyone called it an evaluation, I think we just go, yeah, cool, mate, we'll sort this out.
It's honestly no big deal, but it's just because it happens so much. It's like this kind of like nails down a chalkboard for us, and we'll come back and as valuers, you have your inner like giggle within your industry, and we'll come back and you'll be like, oh, go called the evaluator again. Like people just they don't mean any harm by this, to just say it right, but we just
it's one letter, but it throws the entire
the whole thing out. Yeah. And I feel like people don't even know that we are valuers, not evaluators, let alone understand what we do. Because on the surface, all they think we do is that's what the home is worth or could sell for. They put it on a piece of paper, chuck in a couple sales, and it goes off.
Correct.
Where there's a lot more to that. And we're not just mortgage valuers, Aaron. Valuers can value easements. Your neighbour's fence is encroaching on your land by 4.725 centimetres. What's their compensation? There could be a highway through your property. A valuer. It's only a valuer is the only property professional that can actually attribute market value. You don't get an agent going to court for a family dispute or a property legal matter. It's always the opinion of a valuer. So although we do mortgage valuation work, our profession is much deeper than that. Anytime you need a legal opinion, legally binding on a professional document, it's got to come from a valuer.
Yeah.
So there is much more than just doing it for the bank.
Spot on. I mean, in your time, what I've read, 15,000 properties worth, it's $12 billion of real estate.
What a flex, hey?
Not bad. Pretty impressive.
Well, it's impressive because I'm in Sydney. like everything's so expensive here. So if I was in Darwin or Tasmania, where the median house price is a lot less, it'd be like $5 billion worth of real estate. But it's probably more than that now, to be honest. But like you value one home, it's 20 million, and you're like, that's just one. And you do 5 a day, you 20 million homes a day. There's, quite a lot there in market value. But valuers, and we don't just, it's not that we do 5 a day, 5 days a week. For every property that you value, you've got to analyse 6 to 10 properties. So you're just constantly analysing sales, market. You're in people's homes, you're talking to people, you're looking at data. It's. I always put it this way, it's like a duck above water on the top. We just look so cool, calm, walking through, looking around, taking notes, but underneath the surface, you know how a duck is paddling?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but like on turbo, like twin turbo, because that's how mine, like it's just like click, 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 look. And you'll go to someone's house on a Saturday and you can't switch it off. You're like stone bench tops, wall and floor, cupboards, tiles, air conditioning, and you'll be chatting outside and you're like, yeah, your air conditioning. And they're like, how'd you know I had air conditioning? And you're like, I'm sorry, I couldn't switch it off. It's just going through.
Nature,
so there's a lot there that we're processing.
Awesome. If someone's new is listening, so valuations, for example, not evaluation. So there's 3 types. There's a desktop, which is run off a computer-based system. So as a broker, if I'm going to do a valuation through, say, ANZ, Macquarie Bank, we go through their portal, run that through, and the bank will let us know what kind of range or what they think the property's worth based off an algorithm. Yep. The next one's a curbside, where you would drive by, so also known as a drive-by.
We used to call them drive-bys, but then we had to, we were like, wonder if our phones ever get tapped. We're like, drive-by.
Yeah. So you got the drive-bys, which you're going past, but you're not going in. So is that point you just, hey, look, the property exists and out of shell, here's what it looks like? Or what's anything special to add there?
So the main difference, same but different for desktop and curbsides, as we call them. With a desktop, you really are assessing from a bit of a one-dimensional. Okay, you got your Google Maps, and you can only sort of see what you can from a computer. All the information. There's a lot of information there. I guess when we go to a curbside, maybe I'll call that 2 or 3-dimensional, because now all of a sudden you're able to see your surroundings, not just off Google. Oh, there's a electrical power point on that side. There looks like there's a water canal there and I couldn't quite make it out on the Google Maps. oh, is that a dilapidated, hoarder house across the road that might affect the marketability of the home? It's down the road from, right next door to a childcare that I didn't quite make out on my desktop. So, and you can also see if this land is sloping, if there's views. There's only so much you can pick up, and that's picking it up on the curbside. Again, you can't see inside, but you can see everything else.
Yep.
Busy street, is it a thoroughfare? And then obviously the internal inspection is full 4D experience.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah,
and that's
in 3D and, all that.
Great. So full hours, where you go right through the property as well. Awesome. So 17 years in the industry. You've seen it all. Tell us a little bit more about your journey. I usually call it the 3 Ps about yourself personally, professionally, and your property journey to date as well, Belinda.
So personally, I always wanted to get into property, and I wanted to do real estate and perhaps an agent or something in sales. But then at the same time, I always wanted to go to uni.
Yeah.
And then I remember, true story, hand on heart, I had my big fat uni, the book with all the uni courses.
Yeah.
And I just kind of flicked through and I just sort of, looked up to God or the gods or the universe or whatever. And I was like, what should I do? And I promise I opened it up and I looked down and it had property economics. And I was like, oh, what's that? And then I saw property value. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I went to school with a guy that did valuations. So I called him up. He's like, yeah, it's awesome. You should do it. And then I had enough marks for my uni for high school to get in. So my personal journey there brought me, I always knew I wanted to get into property, so that brought me in. Then I got a job pretty much straight out of uni for one of the sort of a smaller but large valuation firms. And that was almost like looking back, was probably the most perfect place to cut my teeth because they were small enough that I could do a little bit of everything.
Nice.
But big enough to have really good contracts with like DHA. I used to do land value objection work. I used to do, I was one of the first valuers that ever pioneered or worked as the prototype of Valix.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we've got this new system called Valix. And I was like, what? Yeah, now it's all you use, right? Yeah. So people that don't know what Valix is just it's probably the meat between the sandwich of the broker, send it to Valix, Valix then sends it out to the valuer, and then it goes back up the chain. So, and then I stayed there for a bit. I moved to another valuation firm. I was there for 11 years, and there I moved into the field of tax. So I became a registered tax agent, specialising in depreciation schedules.
Yeah.
I guess when you do the same thing day in, day out, I did commercial, didn't love it, moved into the tax space, then there for 11 years, moved into the field of property investment strategy, which was extremely loved to extremely hate. The love bit was great. I get to take 17 years of professional experience and help investors make better investment decisions.
Yeah.
Loved it until I found out it was just there for pushing sales onto people because they'd sell a package and a buyer's agent. So the whole time I was there, my intention was never, all I wanted to do was help give them advice.
Yeah.
And I was told, no, you got to sell them the package and then give them the advice. And I didn't spend 17 years or 15 years at that time as a professional to be in sales. If you want to be sales, be a real estate agent.
Yeah.
So then I went out and worked for myself. Because of social media, I just had a lot of people coming to me asking me for advice. And I think I turned to my husband. I was like, babe, do you reckon I can charge for this? And he's like, I don't know, find out. So I would you pay $100 for the service? And like, hell yeah, I'll pay $100 for that. And I was like, oh, that was too easy. Yeah. Would you pay $200? Until I kind of
Until you got a few no's and you know where the sweet spot is.
Would you pay $5,000? No, okay, we'll bring it back a bit. So that kind of gave me, and plus because I can do tax depreciation schedules, I can do valuations as my professional service.
Yeah.
I moved into reviewing floor plans because I found people were like, oh, I'm about to renovate, but is 4 bedrooms better than 3 bedrooms? Do I go 2 living areas? Do I go an ensuite or another bathroom or a bigger bathroom or typical questions? And I was like, I can help you. So then that went into advisory. poached, or I kind of reached out, working at Optian where I am now, and just helping them grow their consumer product because they do predominantly mortgage work.
Yeah.
But valuers have so much more to give than just valuations. So trying to help branch into the consumer space so consumers feel safe to get qualified advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And just on that advice part, I just want to reiterate that anything we're discussing is going to be general in nature.
General,
and
super
not
general.
intended to give advice. Thanks very much. You mentioned before our Sydney market. You said, look, I get to see properties all over Sydney. I read an interesting article the other day talking about is Sydney on track to become like the next San Fran, for example. I often say like we're going to move into a market like a London or a New York where it's the separation between haves and have-nots. I guess the correlation between Sydney and San Fran's got a middle class that are now collecting food shelters, and food meal tickets and stuff. It's a different market. But I guess the analogy is similar, which is people on good incomes, professionally, like, go to uni, get an education, get a good role, earn a good wicket, but still can't crack into the property market. And it's a real shame. And talking about intergenerational wealth through property, which is something that we speak about constantly, which is it's an unfair advantage, but those with property,
it's going to be an avalanche, hey,
isn't it?
It's coming. Yeah.
And so I guess your thoughts when you look at the Sydney market, do you see us heading down that path? And if so, what options do we have to bring it back into slightly more of an affordable market as well? Or is that ship just sailing? It's beyond the point of no return?
It's kind of sailed. No, I wouldn't say it's sailed, but there's plenty of ships in the dock getting ready. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I've seen with Sydney is I started valuing in the early 2000s, and before I was valuing, I was working in a real estate agency.
Yeah.
When I was at uni, and I used to be like, rain and horn only, Belinda speaking. And it was very much people would kind of, call up to see what was on the market rather than...
Was that the stage where real estate agents would drive someone to the property as well?
Yeah. And then I'd get
days.
people would come past and ask for the list.
Yeah.
And like, here you go. So I've seen that. And I guess when I started valuing, I remember going to my mum, I don't know how people are affording these houses, Mum. Like, it's so expensive. And this is when the median house price was $500,000.
Yes.
And I'm like, they can't go up anymore. She's like, they will, and they have, and they will continue. I was like, they can't. And then before you know it, another, cycle would come in the market, and again, it would go up. And just Sydney's one of those beasts of a city that just when you think you've hit a ceiling, can't go up anymore. It's just, I don't know what happens. It gets like a, it's like it's second breath. You're running. I don't know if you've ever played sport, but you're
Absolutely.
like, I can't run anymore. And then all of a sudden someone passes you the ball and you're like, I'm going to score. And you just find this energy. That's the Sydney market. Yeah. It gets fatigued and then it just picks up again. But the problem is that the top end catch wind in its sails a hell of a lot more than perhaps the bottom end. And it all stems down from, I always say the property market comes down to two human beings making a transaction. That's all it is. I want this much from my house. Well, I'm only going to pay you this much. Well, what are we going to do about it? Negotiate, agent, games, BS, back and forth, whatever you got to do. But somehow there's a transaction. That transaction becomes data. That data becomes a graph. That graph becomes, core logic information somewhere. If you break it down to who are the human beings and where are they in their life and what's stopping them from paying more, you'll find that gap getting bigger because of the pay gap, because of the generation gap.
Yeah.
It's not one-dimensional. There is so many different things that are coming into play.
Yeah.
And because it's a major capital city, Sydney, with a lot of money on the top end circulating, there's still going to have to be people that are, working in retail, working in entry-level jobs. They might get there, but the city just gets divided. It's almost like death by 1,000 cuts almost. And I think that's what's happening to the city. I don't know how many cuts we're in before the death is coming, but I feel that Sydney as a whole will always get pulled up. It's like magnetic because the top end, there's never a ceiling. And I had a client last night I was explaining with a glass of water. I was like, you have your top end and you can't afford in the top end, so the money trickles down to the B grade suburb. And then that trickles down to the next suburb until you eventually get down to whatever you consider the lowest
Yeah.
suburb is in Sydney. But then the money always trickles, so then it gets pulled up almost. So I think the flow of money is always going to be there. So we'll always have that increase. But what happens is those entering the market on the bottom end, it just keeps lifting.
Correct.
And because wages aren't catching up, it's like, well, how do I get there? If that sort of makes sense. So I think that's why people are like, oh, the next generation. And I think back even as far as like before the pandemic, 2018, 19, and you think about, you're always in hindsight, I should have bought that property.
Absolutely.
If you don't, you're lying. You're lying if you've never thought that. I used to have my parents say to me, like, we used to drive past, like, oh, remember we were going to buy that house? And in the back seat, I'd be like, oh, my God, my parents are so boring. And now I do it to my kids. So I'm like, Mummy and Daddy nearly bought that house, So you look back and the growth has been so strong, so aggressive and so high in such a short amount of time. And I think it's really scared a lot of people.
Yeah.
What's our next generation going to do? Because I can't imagine being a first-time buyer in this market.
That's exactly
and it's really scary. And if it is, you know what I found too, when I first started valuing, being a young person growing up, right, it was like, where do you live? And Sydney's very much like that.
Absolutely.
Oh, my God.
Absolutely.
It's so...
One suburb across can make all the difference.
Hi, I'm Belinda. Nice to meet you. Chat. So where do you live? What do you do, right? And straight away, judgmental. And it's like, and then I find, and I hate it when I hear this because, like, I lived in the southwestern suburbs for a bit as a kid, right? Great. Yeah. 2200.
Whereabouts?
George's Hall.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so it's the Bankstown. In the Bank double if you know. So it was very much like if you came from the western suburbs, you'd always make an excuse. It's like, oh, I'm in George's Hall, but like I'm living with my parents and we save. Do you know? And I feel like you don't have to apologise. You shouldn't feel that way. Where now I think it's like I have a home that's like good for you. Like I feel the stigma of where you live is still there because it's Sydney and we're superficial. Like we can't.
Absolutely.
We can't.
Absolutely.
Like it's who we are. But I feel like people would rather rent in a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment just to be in a aspirational or high end suburb. But now I feel like they're like, you know what, the home is more important to me, and that's why those greenfield sites on the outskirts of Sydney, those new house and land areas are booming at the moment because people are going, do I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Randwick for the same price I can get a brand new 4-bedroom home?
Schofields.
Yeah. Leppington, and they're not bad.
I mean, it's brand. So I mean,
correct.
They love the idea of something brand new versus, property in Randwick, 2-bedroom units.
It's like
old,
a game.
Tired, great.
Yeah. In Sydney, it's a game. It's like, what do I compromise on?
Correct.
The price, the house, or the location. So it's like pick 2.
Pick 2 out of 3. Spot on. I love it. Do you feel as a valuer, and I think we just had this chat before, you don't get to pick the valuer.
No.
So when, as a broker, someone buys a property and I go to call it CBA appoints a valuer, goes out there, inspects the property, comes out with a valuation report. Quite often the client doesn't even see it.
No.
Goes straight back to the bank. Sometimes we don't even see it as a broker. So you have no idea who the valuer is. And do you feel that's probably why valuers aren't, because you're professionals, like in terms of like being held in esteem, same on par with an accountant, for example, planner.
Correct, yeah.
I'd say brokers are less in that sense because we don't have the same professional qualifications as a valuer. But you get to choose as a client, they get to choose their planner, accountant, real estate agent, but not choose the valuer. Do you feel that kind of weighs against the industry a little bit to a certain degree?
No, because I think it is so important for our job to be objective and to be at arm's length. And what I think people need to understand is I don't feel like they should because we didn't engage with them. The letter of instruction came directly from, not even the broker, it came from the lender, the primary lender. So you may have some smaller 2nd or 3rd tier lenders, but they might be backed by a major bank.
Correct.
So our liability or our duty of care has to be to our instructing party. So if our instructing party is the bank, I have to choose my words, be really respectful that it's your home. we're walking into your home, we're valuing your home, but as if you look at it kind of like a house, you don't own it. The bank technically own it until you pay that last payment off. And you're like, see ya, I'm out of here. Yeah. So the bank is asking us as a professional, we aren't professionals, go out and beyond just what it's worth, be our eyes, be our ears on the ground and tell us exactly what it's worth. So it's extremely important that we don't have that emotional attachment to the owner. Sometimes you get chatting and you're like, oh, this is such a nice person and I'm going to smash them on the bow and you feel terrible, but at the same time, your duty of care is not to them, they're the third party. So I think it helps us because it helps us stay at arm's length. And that's why a lot of owners will be like, can I have a copy of the report or do you know what it's worth? And we're like, we can't give it to you and we can't tell you because we're contractually obligated to do the valuation for the bank. You may have paid for it, but we have got a contract in place directly with the bank. So
which for a homeowner,
with the
they can't sometimes get their head around that.
It's difficult.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we're close to it, so we understand the nuts and bolts of it. But for a homeowner, someone's coming into their house to value it, they can't actually control the outcome. So they've renovated the property or they've done something to it and they're so proud to take the value around and they think that it's going to, I don't know, and they'll call us going, so what do we do? I was like, keep it clean, neat and tidy and be friendly. But at that point, you really can't change the aspects of your property. So when you're going in, apart from someone being nice, what is your trained eye looking for and what are you picking up?
Yeah, so I've been doing this for 17, 18 years. And ironically, 2 weeks ago, I had my place valued. And
How did it feel? The shoe was on the other.
I hate it. I was like, why am I so nervous? I'm like, I'm the valuer from TikTok. I go, who should be nervous coming to my house? So I was kind of, again, like clean the house, turned on all the lights, opened all the blinds, made sure it was light and airy. And typical valuer, he just sort of walks in. And I know because I do it. And he was very quick. And I'm like, he didn't spend enough time in my house. He didn't see.
That's exactly what everyone says. They walked in and out.
It's awesome. My home's awesome. Like, you should see how good it is. But, and then his vow came back and I thought it was like a little short.
Yeah.
And then, so funny thing, I first got an instruction from Option, but because I work for them, it was a conflict.
Absolutely.
So then I sent and I was like, now I know how like our clients feel, you know. So we had to get a new valuer out. But he just did exactly right, came in, came out, measured up, and it was very quick. I thought his vow was low, but you've got to remember that it's not about what a property could potentially sell for. Because come auction day, you've probably dressed the property up, you've cleaned it, you've cut the garden, the grass, you've done some cosmetic thing. No one ever really just sells it as is.
Yeah.
They spend time and money to make it presentable for auction. But when the valuer goes through, they go through as a moment in time, just then and there. And the home might not be sale ready. And not that, it could also mean that we know it could maybe sell for more, but we just got no evidence in the market to prove otherwise. And that's what is a really, really big thing that people don't understand. So when I had a look at this valuer's report and I compared the sales to my database, I was like, yeah, okay, all right, fair enough, I get it. Like, I understand why you picked those sales and why my valuation came in at what it did. I didn't need it high or low. I was just more of an ego thing, like
just because you can.
It's because my home. But that's what it was. So when we go through, it's really important that we look at obviously the layout is super important. We look at the condition. We look at the aspect, the view, what it is, Aaron. Because no two homes are the same, and it's very different. Yeah. And we are looking at everything in the home. What it comes down to is, remember how I said it comes down to the human beings? We look at it as if, okay, how would the market, meaning literally people, respond to this home? What marketability factors, what's good about the property, what's bad about the property? If it went to auction this afternoon, are we going to have a lot of interest in the home? If the bank has to sell it almost immediately, what would they get? And it's almost like a worst case scenario, but not. That's why people think we're conservative. It's like, well, we're not conservative, but we don't inflate it by 20% like an agent would.
Absolutely.
Because in case, like, we might have a buyer on the day that loves it. You know, you never know. You just need that one buyer. We can't hang our hat on one buyer. We have to hang our hat on the market. How's the market going to respond to it? So whatever way you present your home, it's because I guess, put it this way, when the home goes to sell, when it's your home and you live in, it's yours. You do what you want. What sparks joy, right?
Yeah.
Marie Kondo. But when you sell it, it's no longer your home. It now belongs to the market and the new buyer.
Nice one.
Yeah, and it's up to them to tell you what they want to pay for it. So if you have a barbecue area in the back that your two great-grandfathers helped you build in 1947 and it makes the best, you know, barbecue, but it's sentimental, you know, oh, my son took his first steps or we had our daughter's wedding in the backyard. Next buyer doesn't care. So to them, they are only going to pay what they want, and that's the market, and that's how we assess market value.
Yeah.
It doesn't, you know, you could tell me you did all these fancy things. I'm like, you did it for you. You didn't do it for the next buyer. Correct. So they're not going to pay for that.
Yeah.
And that's where we can be a little brutal and say, well, it's market value.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, the question is it art or science? Because you've got your professional hat on, which is qualifications, enough properties, you know what it is, and then you could have two valuers go through the same property and get a different outcome, which is where that art element comes into it, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's with anything. You get two different agents.
Absolutely.
One will give you a really aggressive because they can. You don't know, somebody might fall in love with it. How do you know that their in-laws, who are their babysitters, live across the road? Or it's you know, around the corner from work and daycare. Correct. And you know, and to
them, there's a premium that gets attached to that. Correct, absolutely.
Yeah. So you could, and then you have another agent that might be like, look, I've sold something similar that struggled. You might struggle too.
Yeah.
And then same as you can have a couple of those, you know, there's online valuation sort of AVM type things.
Totally.
Yeah. You could have one from 2 or 3 different programs and get very different outcomes. So properties like that, right? Why will you have 25 people register at auction and then they all fall off because they all think it's worth different prices to different people and only one person at the top?
Yeah.
Whereas if it was like man behind a curtain setting the price, okay, number 7 Smith Street, 1.8 million, send. You know, it doesn't work like that, and that's the part about property, because it's human beings. What does it mean to each person individually?
It's so subjective. Yeah, thank you very much. Speaking about the subjective part, what does weigh on that valuation? So in your example, let's take the fact that it was you and getting a potential low valuation. That's probably every homeowner's or home buyer's nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is, I'm going to get a valuation. We're sweating on that, I guess, that part of the client experience. What happens in that scenario? And I guess your thoughts, what options people have if there's about low valuation?
Yeah, to brokers, if you're watching, listening, it's always annoying when we get really high estimates. Oh, let's put 3 on it, hoping to get 2. Okay? Like, because they're always conservative, and we're going to be sneaky. We're going to trick the valuer. We're going to put 3 on it, and they'll think might put 2.5. Ha ha ha, we're so smart. You're not smart. You're annoying. You're annoying because what happens
without seeing what we do, but
no, we do get them sometimes, but people think it's a tactic or a little strategy. Yeah. The reason I'm being cheeky here, the reason I'm saying it's annoying is because we prep our reports prior to going out. So all our valuers will, it's in, a certain suburb, the 3 million, right? And we're going to have a look and analyse our 3 million sales. And we don't really know what it is until we go in. Sometimes we kind of do a desktop and we're like, looks pretty average, but we don't know until we're like, maybe it's one of those, homes that's beautifully renovated inside and a real kind of hidden gem.
Yeah.
And then we get inside and we're like, it's not a hidden gem. It's actually just an average home.
Yeah.
And then you get back and you're like, I got to reanalyze all my sales again. So it takes you twice as long.
Yeah, fair point.
So I would say get it as close to market value as you can in your initial estimate, and just have an open conversation with the valuer on site. Because, as I said earlier, the valuation is between the valuer and the bank. That's your duty of care, right?
Yeah.
Your information, how much you borrow, what you do for work, your pay slips, all that stuff you give to the mortgage broker, that is absolutely private and confidential. And we have no right to see that because you are not our client.
Yeah.
The bank is our client, and all they care about is the market value of that home for security against the loan. And that's why you got different LVRs.
Yeah.
Then you've got LMI that comes into it. Sometimes I think it's helpful if the valuer actually knew what the loan amount was, only because it is so subjective. And if you absolutely needed 2.6 to get that across, and we were there going, I've got some sales at 2.4, I've got some at 2.5, I've got some at 2.6. You know what, I'm going to, market conditions, we just had an RBA announcement, say it went up. Thinking I'm going to stay closer to 2.4. But if I knew it was 2.6, I'd say, well, I feel more comfortable maybe to go to 2.5. Still 2.6 is above market parameters, but at least it helps the client get a little closer.
Yeah.
If you have some sales evidence that you want to present to the valuer as well, we're always open to accept that. Doesn't mean that we will use that as gospel in our reports.
Is that annoying if someone has sales evidence when they're coming to their house?
No, if they do it respectfully, I don't mind.
Okay.
Honestly, I don't mind. If they within 6 months, you know the rules.
Yeah,
within 6 months, within sort of that 10 to 15%, and please do within a reasonable. I don't want to be like, oh, the home in Vaucluse. I'm like, yeah, but you're in Randwick. But it's similar, same builder. I'm like, yeah. So keeping apples with apples within a reasonable date, give it to the valuer. If you know maybe an off-market transaction, or, rather than the house down the road, it's like, what house?
Yeah.
Tell me. So come in with evidence.
Yeah, and it has to have settled, because if it's just sold last week, does that count still, or does that?
It does.
Yeah.
But the banks like us to settle sales, meaning it is now officially in the hands of the new owner.
Yeah.
Because sometimes anything can happen, you know that.
That's great.
Anything can happen. And if it relists back on the market, it can affect the valuation a little bit of the sale. But yes, settled sales are gold. But every now and then there might be a transaction that has just happened, or, a mum at school or a dad at school, or karate or soccer just sold his home quietly, and you know that, and you don't think the valuer will, please tell us.
Nice one.
Yeah.
Awesome. Part of what you do is talking about, you mentioned before, looking at floor plans, renovations, people are going through it. Now, there's two parts to valuations. One is people that are renovating for their own home, and people that are renovating for their investment properties, which are very different types of renovations. So we'll kind of touch on both. So someone that's looking at own a rock renovation, going to be in the house for a long time, for example, what are the parts that add the most value, do you feel, or where you put the most energy into your own home?
When it comes to your own home, it's always about I always ask when I do my consults, what's your end goal with this? Because some people either have, in 3 to 5 years we might move because the house, they might outgrow the home, or they're like, this is my forever home, I'm going to be here forever, so I kind of don't care. And I always try and get them to sort of close their eyes and imagine the home as like a piggy bank for money. Because I think, put it this way, if you went to the coffee shop and you ordered a large cap every day, and one day you walk in, you're like, I'm just going to feel like a small cap today. But because the coffee person is so used to taking your order, they charge you for the large. Yeah. And you walk off and you're like, sorry, you charge me $5.50. It's a small today. It's actually $4.50. Oh, sorry. And they give you you hustle for $1 is what I'm trying to say. But when it comes to our properties, we just sometimes pump money in absent-mindedly. We don't really think about the money that goes into it. Said. So if you're prepared to hustle for $1 at your local coffee shop, be prepared to change your mindset and hustle for the money you're putting into your home, because it's money at the end of the day, and you know how expensive it is out there, and it doesn't translate into market value. People, I don't care, I'll be here forever. And you think, well, let's be clear about how much you're overcapitalizing so you're aware. That difference in 20 grand is a holiday, or, a part of a car, or reducing, putting it for your kids for school or something. So I think when you are renovating for yourself, that whole, I want it, I need it, I deserve it, I don't care, it's my home, it's my money, I can spend what I want. If you kind of step back and really see it as money, then you really understand, do I really need it? If you can't live without it and it will take the joy out of your life, get it. But if you sort of, I can, but I maybe can do it a little cheaper, or what? If you're overcapitalizing, think of other ways to do it. If you're in a great area and you're producing a great home, the market will eventually catch up. Yeah. But if you're doing it for an investment and you're planning on, or you're doing it to sell earlier, then every cent is vital. Every cent. Because when you sell, your profit is 100 grand. It could have been 150 if you just did it smarter. It's 50 grand. That's some people an entire year's worth of
income.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when it comes to investing too, just make sure that you have a good, clean, safe, functional home for your tenant. I'm not saying that you need to produce a low quality home. Quality is mandatory because they're going to be like wear and tear.
Yeah.
But you know, a stone benchtop versus a high-end, natural-looking stone, are you going to get $10 more rent a week because you have that stone? Or is your rent going to stay exactly the same? Whether you got German-made tiles versus some that were made in China or Indonesia, nothing wrong with them. Is your tenant going to pay you $20 more because you spent 20 grand more on fancy stuff?
Yeah.
You know, they want blinds. They just want blinds to block out the light. Looks good, it's functional. Does it have to be electric, motorized?
Yeah.
Things like that. So always think about what you're putting in your home as money versus I need to have it.
Nice one. Really love it. When someone's doing a strategic rental on an investment property and they're trying to get that real equity, so the goal is buy a property maybe ideally under market value, give it some strategic renovation, get the property revalued, release the equity, go back to reinvest for the next investment. So it's a repeatable model, scalable model. What are you looking for? It's going to give the highest bang for buck on an uplift on a strategic reno.
Yeah, you know what the sweet spot is for those renos? I love homes, like projecty homes that were built in the late 90s, early 2000s, because they're ripe for renovation now, and the floor plans aren't horrible. A lot of those like 70s and 80s homes that kind of are a bit, they've been renovated throughout the years, but they're not good enough. You need to actually do a reno. The floor plans don't work.
You mean the toilet next to the kitchen?
Yeah, or the kitchen is completely separated from the lounge room. It's separated from this is the old, the living areas in the front of the house instead of the back of the house.
Spot on.
Yeah. The less you need to fiddle with the home, structural walls, moving plumbing, moving electricity around, the more it costs.
Yeah.
The less you need to fiddle with the home and the more you can just do what I call the lipstick renos. New floors, new kitchen, paint, change the lights, real cosmetic, high-end cosmetic, biggest bang for buck.
Okay.
The minute because cost of construction.
Yeah.
Yeah, those moving of walls could have paid off prior to this escalation in inflation and cost of construction. Now I think if you've got a sink in the kitchen and you've got to replace the kitchen, try and keep it in the same spot. Yeah. If you can, removing part of a wall, obviously, but removing a whole wall and getting an engineer in and getting the right certificates and, unless it's going to make a detrimental effect on the overall openness of the home, you got to weigh out the value versus cost.
Yeah.
And rate per square metre, you want to get that rate per square metre for reno down, right down.
Yeah.
And it's about working out that sweet spot because sometimes you can spend $500,000 on a reno and add $700,000 in value, which only means you made a $200K profit. But you could have spent $150 and made $500,000 in profit. Your margin is much bigger. So it's about like a Rubik's Cube. You just keep kind of clicking and fiddling until you're like, okay, I could spend more, I could get more, but the gap closes.
Okay.
My profit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you get more at the end of the day and you set a suburb record, but think of the money, what's going to be in your pocket once you pay your agent fees, this is if you're flipping and doing it strategically like that.
Yeah.
And when you pull out your equity, if you are pulling out your equity, you've got to think, well, I spent the money only to make the money back in equity.
$1 for $1.
Yeah.
This is it.
Otherwise, that $300,000 I pumped into it, I should have just used that as a deposit and forget about renovating the home, because I spent $300 to make $100. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Perfect. One of the strings to your bow is with your service ad valuer is the investment mentorship.
Yeah.
Now, this is an interesting one because you've got buyer's agents who do the property plan, for example.
Yep.
You've got financial plans that can kind of work on a cash flow. But there's no one really in that, hey, look, I've got a need or an itch to scratch around building a portfolio, but you've come in going, I think I can fill this void or gap here. Take us through what can someone expect when they're coming under yourself for mentorship around building a portfolio.
I think, and you probably get this too, people want to invest and the first thing they say is, what property should I buy?
Absolutely.
So their mind goes, if you think of like a pyramid, and do you remember in school you used to have those, the food pyramid?
Yeah.
And then at the top, only a little bit of sweets, and then down the bottom would be all the healthy food?
Yeah.
Well, if you think about the top as the sweet, and that's the home, that's the sexy part, like the house, and I'm going to look for this kind of house, and you spend, your first thing you do is go on realestate.com or Domain, whatever it is, and you start going, I wonder what they're selling in, in Smithfield. I heard Smithfield's a good area. Oh, I wonder what they're doing in like, Parramatta, and you start looking at homes. That is the last thing, because the home is the variable, okay? And we need to understand the fixed. And then we need to understand what macro and microeconomic factors influence the fixed. And that's the bottom of the pyramid. And nobody takes the dive right down to the very bottom. So I get right down, put my sleeves up, and I try and work out the fundamentals, and then we work our way up. And the last bit on top, which I'm like, it's of no consequence right now. And they get frustrated because I just want to talk about the property. Like, how many bedrooms? A 3-bedroom home? How many? I'm like, we'll get there. Just wait. And we got to start from the bottom and work up. So we've got to understand, with the client, they all say, I want to invest. Well, why? I want the rent to cover the mortgage. Why? And then we start breaking down, okay, these areas have where the rent covers the mortgage. That's fine. But you're fishing for little fish, because I don't think you're going to get a really strong capital growth, just given the demographics of the people living there, these factors. Oh, but there's infrastructure. Yes, but what does the infrastructure bring in, and how is that going to affect the market value? Because property's only worth what somebody's prepared to pay for it.
Correct.
And if you have someone, but a Bunnings opened. Yeah, but who works at Bunnings? Nothing to do with the people, looking at the money and the finance. What are they earning? Oh, they're on minimum wage. Well, if they're on minimum wage, how is that wage going to exponentially increase your market value of your home? Whereas a beast like Sydney, you've got a major capital CBD that has incomes flowing, money flowing to that CBD that then trickles back out to the city.
Yeah.
So when we have regional towns, we need to be, I want to in regions because you can get great yields. Yes, but let's just step aside, because we're only looking at the surface now of the fixed. We've got to look deep down, and that's what I mentor them.
Yeah. Okay.
So I mentor them to find the right property. If they want to use a buyer's agent, I'm like, well, you're about to hand over anywhere from 10 to 20, 25K. Don't go to a buyer's agent and say, I'm looking to buy, I've got $700,000 and I really want to buy this type of property. What you're essentially doing is you're working for them, because they'll find you 3 or 4 properties, tell you which one's good, and that's what they're supposed to do. But you're paying them a lot of money to find you a property. You're in control. So I mentor them and say, right, now we know exactly, because we get to the top, I go, yay, and the balloons pop out from the ceiling. Now we can talk about the property. I want you to go back to your buyer's agent, and based on our analysis, I want you to find a 4-bedroom home with this potential. I want it on this type of street. I want it north-facing backyard. I want a corner allotment, because later on it could be development potential. Blah, blah, blah. Give it to your buyer's agent. Tell them not to come back to you until they found you exactly what you want.
Beautiful.
Because I find then A lot of good buyer's agents, but a lot of buyer's agents that are just in it for the money.
Oh, great.
Unqualified. They used to be a plumber. They used to be a school teacher. They used to be in marketing, and their friend of a friend was a buyer's agent. Oh, I made so much money.
Great.
Oh, I hate my job. I'm going to be a buyer's agent. They do some course online, and all of a sudden they're an expert. And I'm like, I'm actually an expert. I can help you. But I think if you want them to give you the right property, guide them. Their job is to find you your right property. Tell them what your right property is.
I love it.
Yeah.
Great advice.
That's how I help.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Awesome. We could keep chatting. We're going to get you back on. You got a mountain of knowledge, Belinda. Thank you so much.
I talk a lot. Sorry, not sorry.
Well, yeah, don't be sorry at all. This is what we want guests to come on, share their knowledge. You've been so generous. I appreciate it. You got an energy. There's obviously a real kick that you get out of this. And I guess watching you go into that next phase of helping new investors and even seasoned investors fine tune their strategy. This is where you're going to rise to the top. Rising tide lifts all ships, and other people are going to come on that journey with you. So credit to you. Well done.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Thanks.
I appreciate it. If you want to get in touch with Belinda, we'll include the details to all your socials. Not that we need to include your socials. You'll be able to find Belinda pretty easily. But I think it's obviously a real credit to what Belinda's putting out there, that it's resonating with people that are connecting with your message, and a big community is kind of following what you're doing. So well done.
Yep, thank you, and thanks for having me. And keep doing what you're doing, because you're bringing great guests on here to share your knowledge and help them on their journey. So
I appreciate it. Thank you. Selfishly, it makes me look good when we've got guests as well. So thank you. That's a wrap for another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. If you've loved it, please leave us a review. We are getting an awesome kick out of people that are reaching out to us from our podcast as well. So include details if you do want to reach out to Belinda or ourselves with some help and guidance on your investment journey. Until next time, take care.